Before sunrise on June 27, 1995, a morning news anchor in Mason City, Iowa, was already late for work. Her name was Jodi Huisentruit. At 27 years old, she was the familiar face of KIMT-TV's early broadcast. Every weekday, viewers saw her behind the anchor desk, bright and prepared, delivering the first headlines of the day. But that Tuesday, her chair was empty. A producer called Jodi at home after she failed to arrive. Jodi answered. She said she had overslept. She said she would be there shortly. It was the last confirmed conversation anyone ever had with her. A few hours later, police arrived at her apartment complex. Her red Mazda Miata was still in the parking lot. Jodi's shoes were on the ground. So were her keys, a hairdryer, other personal items. There were signs of a struggle beside the car. Jodi was gone. No confirmed sighting followed. No one has been charged. And more than 3 decades later, the answer may still be hidden inside one short stretch of time. Between a phone call before dawn and an empty newsroom at 6 in the morning. This is the disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit. Jodi grew up in Long Prairie, Minnesota. Friends remembered her as focused, outgoing, and determined. She wanted to work in television news long before she had a job in front of a camera. She studied broadcast journalism at St. Cloud State University. Then she began building the kind of career many young reporters hope for. Local stations, early shifts, long hours, and a chance to move upward. By 1995, she was working at KIMT in Mason City, a northern Iowa city, where local television anchors were familiar faces in daily life. Jodi anchored the station's early news and its noon program. She was not a distant celebrity. She was someone viewers recognized at the grocery store, at community events, and around town. Her co-workers described her as energetic and warm. She cared about the show. She wanted to be on time. And she had plans beyond Mason City. But in television, the morning shift starts long before most of the city wakes up. Jodi was usually expected at the station around 3:30 a.m. On Tuesday, June 27th, she did not arrive. The night before had appeared ordinary. Jodi had spent the day at a charity golf tournament. Later that evening, she visited a friend. There is no publicly established evidence that anything about that night directly led to what happened hours later. At home, she needed sleep. Her workday would begin before sunrise. Then the alarm, or whatever should have woken her, did not get her to the station. Around 4:10 that morning, KIMT producer Amy Kunz called to check on her. Jodi picked up. She sounded awake enough to speak. She asked about the show, and she said she would be right there. That detail has haunted the case for decades. Jodi had not disappeared during a road trip. She had not vanished on an unfamiliar highway. Her workplace was only about a mile from her apartment. She needed to get dressed, walk outside, get into her car, and drive a few minutes to the station. Somewhere after that phone call, something interrupted that simple routine. At 5:30 a.m., Jodi still had not arrived. Another call to her apartment reached only her answering machine. At 6, the morning broadcast went on without her. Her producer stepped in and delivered the news from the anchor desk, where Jodi should have been sitting. The show had to continue. But something was clearly wrong. Shortly after 7 a.m., KIMT contacted police. When officers reached Jodi's apartment complex, they found the kind of scene that changes a missing person case in an instant. Her red Mazda Miata was still there. Her belongings were scattered near it. Investigators found her shoes, her hairdryer, and her keys on the ground. The key was bent. There were apparent marks in the dirt near the car that suggested a struggle. There was no sign that Jodi had simply decided not to go to work. There was no sign that she had packed for a trip. There was no sign that she had driven away. The evidence left behind suggested that whatever happened took place in the parking lot, in the thin blue darkness before sunrise. Police quickly treated the disappearance as possible foul play. Search teams worked through the apartment complex and nearby areas, including the banks of the Winnebago River. The FBI was asked to assist as the search expanded. Inside the KIMT newsroom, co-workers faced a cruel reality. The woman who was supposed to report the morning's news had become the story. The city responded. Yellow ribbons appeared. Tips came in. Investigators reviewed Jodi's life, her habits, her relationships, and the final hours before she disappeared. They also examined whether anyone may have known her schedule. Jodi's early shift was predictable. She lived alone. Her commute was short. And the evidence outside her apartment raised the possibility that someone had been waiting. But possibility is not proof. Over the years, the investigation has considered numerous leads. Witnesses reported things that may or may not have been connected. There were reports involving a scream and a light-colored van in the area. Neither has been definitively tied to Jodi's disappearance. Police also learned that months earlier, Jodi had reported a troubling encounter while she was exercising. That earlier incident was investigated, but it was never publicly established as connected to the morning she vanished. People in Jodi's circle were questioned. Some became the focus of public speculation. But speculation is not evidence, and no person has ever been charged in connection with her disappearance. That distinction matters. A true crime story can make uncertainty look like an answer. A familiar name can begin to sound guilty simply because it has been repeated for years. But in Jodi's case, the central fact has never changed. No one knows what happened after she walked toward her car. There was physical evidence of disruption. There was a phone call. There was an empty seat at a news desk. And then there was silence. In 2001, Jodi was declared legally dead. But the investigation did not become history. Her case remains open, and investigators still receive information. In 2026, a private investigator said he had provided new information to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. That claim has not led to a public arrest or charge. It is a lead, not a resolution. Investigators have preserved what they can. Time can change a case. New methods can make old evidence speak differently. A small item that could not be tested in 1995 may matter in a way it did not then. But time can also erase things. Memories blur. Witnesses move away. People die. A witness who once believed a detail was unimportant may not realize its value until years later. That is why unresolved cases do not end when the headlines fade. They wait for a memory, for a name, for a fact that finally connects the scattered pieces. For Jodi's family and friends, the case has never been only about a mystery. It is about a person whose life was cut off in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. She was supposed to be rushing. She was supposed to arrive late, take her place in the studio, and start reading the news. Instead, the city woke up to the fact that she was missing. The most unsettling part of this case is its small scale. There was no long journey, no remote wilderness, no storm, no broken-down car on an empty highway. There was only an apartment parking lot, a woman late for work, a car left behind, and a few personal things on the pavement. Those objects tell us that something happened. They do not tell us who was there. They do not tell us where Jodi went. And after more than 30 years, they still do not tell her family how to bring the story to an end. Some cases are remembered because of a single image. For Jodi Huisentruit, it may be that parking lot before dawn. The red car waiting under the lights, the empty space beside it, and the newsroom chair that should never have been empty.